Hey folks, welcome back to my series where I go through the process of making a fully functional gun for Vic's Point Blank. Last time we covered, I believe it was sound effects. Yes, it was sound effects. And now we're gonna get into finally animating the gun. So for animations, you'd need a few of them. Those being a draw animation, where a character pulls the gun out of the inventory or out of the holster or whatever. You need a reload animation and an inspect animation. I believe those are the three main ones, if I'm not mistaken. The other animations would include a firing animation and a reload from empty animation. For the other animations, you'd have a prepare firing animation, so like if you have a charging weapon, you'd need that, and complete fire animation, if your gun needs to complete something before being able to fire again. With that out of the way, let's get into Blockbench and get this thing started. So here we are in Blockbench. As you see, this is the gun that I've been working on for this whole series, the Malorian Arms Overture. And now it's time to set it up for animation. So what I do first is I'm just going to hide the arms again. Going to hide the speed loader because I don't need it at the moment. What I do is I group certain parts of the gun into individual bones. So in this case, I already have the chamber set up. And aside from the moving widget over here, you'll see some other lines over here. This is your pivot point. The pivot point tells the model what or where the model or where the bone should be rotated from. So if I click the rotate tool, you can see that I can rotate the chamber from this angle. Whoop-de-doo. Now you can have bones inside of bones. So inside this chamber, you'll see not only do I have chamber 2, but I also have each and every individual bullet because I do want to add like some somewhat dynamic looking bullets when they eject from the chamber. But yeah, you could see that I have the chamber as its own thing. I could rotate it. And as I just mentioned, the bullets. Now, in order to set bones up, what you'll need to do is you need to group certain cubes together. So, for example, I do want this hammer to move, even though in the source material it does not move at all. I just want to give it some slight, subtle movements, just to give the gun an extra feeling, a little more attention to detail. So what I do is I select the cubes that are supposed to be the hammer, and oh wait, no, I already have it grouped. I completely forgot I did that. Anywho, so yeah, let's just take the handle for example. I'll just select the parts that relate to the handle. So let's just say these 5 cubes. In the Explorer, you'll see that they're highlighted. Oh, 6 cubes, whatever. You want to right click and you want to click Group Elements, and that is your handle. Now, you see when I rotate the model, the pivot point governs where it's rotated from, so it looks really weird. If you want to rotate it from the dead center of the selection, all you need to do is next to this pivot point area in the element, you want to click on Center Pivot, and that'll allow you to do exactly that. Now, if you want to customize where the pivot point is, you want to click on the pivot tool up here. This will allow you to edit where the pivot is. So let's just say I want to change the pivot to right here. And there we go. It rotates from that area. And if you want to get rid of a group, I've already showcased this in an earlier episode, but all you need to do is right-click the bone and click Resolve Group. I don't believe I've set up the main pivot points that I want to set up, though. So what I'll do is I'm going to select Gun. Yeah, I didn't set up the pivot point correctly. So what I'll do is I'll move the pivot point to roughly around where the trigger is. Maybe around the dead center. A little more off to the side. So yeah, because I do want to flip the gun when animating it. And if you do work on revolvers, one mistake that I did in an earlier episode was place the speed loader somewhere off to the side. Usually you do not want to do that because that'll show when the model is dropped on the floor in Minecraft, or it'll like show in your person. It just doesn't look good. So what I did here was I hid the speed loader right where the chamber is. So if I hide the chamber, you'll see that's where the speed loader is. It's directly in the gun. Now to get it to seamlessly appear in frame, I'll explain later. Now that I've set up the gun, it is time to go into the Animate tab up here. Now you'll already see that there's a few animations here. This is if you use the template model from the official template pack for Vix Point Blank. This contained animations for that assault rifle that was modeled before you made any changes to it, so really it just moves the gun around. We're gonna ignore these animations for now, and for me, because I want a custom fire animation for this revolver, I'm gonna right click this area, I'm gonna click add animation, and in this window I'm gonna replace new with fire. Putting fire here will tell Point Blank to use this animation whenever the gun is firing. I'm also going to set the loop mode to loop rather than play once, and I'm going to have snapping set to 30. So now that we have our animation here, we're going to look at the timeline. Right now there is absolutely nothing in our timeline. This little blue line is our cursor for what time frame in our timeline is. I can't speak at all, but I hope you understand what I mean. This little bracket around here tells Blockbench how long the animation is supposed to be. So I'm just going to drag this to 1 for now, and now I'm going to select main. Main is like the very root of the gun. It selects everything in the model. So there we go, there's that. And when I move the model, you probably noticed a little diamond in this timeline. That diamond was a keyframe. Animation's work is basically it interpolates from one pose to the next using keyframes. So let's just say I add 2 keyframes here. This is the start of an animation. 2 keyframes that have 0 all throughout here. This would be where I'd start to use the reference video that I recorded at the very start of the series. Alright. So it looks like the hammer doesn't move at all. I'm probably gonna do that regardless. Just a tiny bit. And there's a considerable amount of recoil that goes into the model. So that's basically what we're going to do. Usually for a fire animation, what I'd do is scrolling in down to the timeline. I'd put it in roughly, let's see, 1, 2, 3, roughly 2 to 3 frames in. So creating new keyframes for rotation and position. I'm gonna rotate the gun around, let's do 35 degrees and pull it back. That looks like a good recoil for now. All the way out here, gonna set another 2 keyframes, and I'm gonna reset everything back to 0. So this is a decent animation. Actually, no, I lied. That was not a decent animation. This is just something horribly basic. This is really just an outline of how it should work, or how the animation should go. So from here, what I do is select the first keyframes in the animation here, and I'm going to experiment with the easing. Oh right, the easings! I forgot! So, in Blockbench, in order to have proper animations for VIX Point Blank, you're going to need an animation plugin. So in order to do that, you click on File, Plugins, and I already have it installed, but you're going to want to install the GeckoLib Animation Utils. This will allow you to use GeckoLib's animation easings. So right, back to the easings. So what I do is, I'd say for this, I would use this back easing, it's called. I like to call it the overshoot easing. And I'm gonna switch it to this curve here, which gives it an overshoot to the out. So if I hold Control and I drag along, or I can view the interpolation in detail. It doesn't add much until I start to work on the animation a bit more, which will be selecting the other two keyframes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to use the back easing again, and I'm going to use this S-shaped curve. So now it looks alright. A bunch more work needs to be done. Actually, instead of this overshoot easing, I'm going to select one of the other smaller curves. Yeah. That looks a lot better. It looks good, but something's missing from it. In my opinion, at least. It's missing some sort of fluidity. And one way to add that fluidity is to select only the rotation keyframes and move them forward by 1 or 2 frames. So I'm going to do 2 frames. There we go. That looks a lot better. So if I go back... Okay, so the barrel does, or the chamber does rotate, but only after the gun gets fired. So I'm going to replicate that in the animation here, and when I have the chamber 2 selected, that's just the chamber on its own, nothing special. I'm gonna only do rotation keyframes for this, so let's see, around here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna rotate it Oh, right, I forgot that I left the speed loader in there. So for the speed loader, I'm just going to select that. I'm going to click on scale, and I'm going to set the scale value to 0. That way it's completely invisible during the chamber rotation. And now I'm starting to think that the model for the chamber here doesn't look so great. Yeah, it's not looking so good. I think that's a skill issue I have there. I did not account for that in my model. So I tried to replicate what would happen during the fire animation in my chamber because of my poor modeling decisions. So as the chamber rotates, it's fine, and then boom, it just snaps. It'll just snap to what it was before, and that doesn't look so good. So I'm probably gonna go ahead and fix that real quick. I'll be right back.
6.5 hours later.
Alright, I think that works. Let's see. That looks a lot better. Now when I rotate it, it looks identical to when it wasn't fired. Now there's also that issue of the barrel or the chamber going back after the animation. Because while yes, it'll look seamless in Blockbench, it will not look seamless in game. In game, there is like a slight flicker that will show up if I don't do what I'm about to do, and that is to set up some sort of way to essentially reset the chamber rotation without the snapping. So what I do is I set up a keyframe to before and after. Now they're both identical from the looks of things, but what's really going on is I have a stepping easing that just snaps to the next or the reset position. It still looks like it's snapping back. I wish there was a way for Blockbench to just allow me to set the stepping to 1 and be done with it. Alright, I should probably just cut all of that out. Cut out the easing part. Anywho. Alright, so we have our firing animation. So we have the gun going back, the barrel rotating, and then the model going back to the default position. Pretty neat. Quite satisfied with it. I do have this hammer. I don't think I'm gonna animate it. Now the next animation I would do is the draw animation. So I'm gonna get rid of the one provided by the template, and I'm gonna make a new one. I'm gonna call it draw, set it to 30 for the snapping, and I'm going to scroll out. Probably gonna set it to 1.5 seconds for now. I know I'm gonna select main, and I'm gonna select gun. Those are pretty much the only two I'm gonna need to animate. So for the gun, I'm going to rotate it more than 360 degrees. Let's do 515 for now. I'm also going to set the position to around that. Maybe a bit more. Probably set it back a bit. Alright, and for the main, I'm going to rotate it back a bit. That pivot point for the main does not look right. I'm going to fix that real quick. So for main, I'm going to set the pivot point to behind the right arm. That way it's easier for me to get some rotations right with the arm. I think what I'm going to do is I'm also going to set the position as well. Hello? Where's my widget? There we go. And here I'm going to set it to 0. Set this to 0. And I'm going to set the rotation of the gun to 0 as well. As well as the position. What I think I'm going to do as well for this, I'm going to move this back a bit. Move this up by 2 keyframes. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the arm a bit up, move it up by a few move it up by a few positions, and then again set this to 0. Still looks horribly scuffed, but I hope you could see where I'm going with this. I'm gonna rotate it by 20, and then finally back to done. So from here, I guess what I could do is start with the easings. Actually, no, I'm gonna move the rotation keyframes, move this back a bit. Now start with the easings. This really is just a matter of experimenting with easings. Like, you can get the keyframes down, and then once you have your desired keyframes, you just experiment with a bunch of easings to get the inertia, the momentum, the weight down. So I'm just gonna experiment with easings until I get something that I like. Alright, I think I'm quite satisfied with how this animation is looking. I mess with the easings, I mess with the timings. You know, the little hand does the gun flip, and then everything just snaps into position. Nice, quick, and smooth. What I would do is I try to balance the animation speed and the gameplay. You know, you don't want animations that take forever but look really good and whatnot. But you also don't want the animations to look too quick. So really it's just finding a nice balance between the animation speed and gameplay. So for this, you know, you don't want the gun flipping to take like 2 seconds before you can actually use the gun. I try to aim between half a second and 1 second. So 1 second roughly at most. Unless it's like a super heavy weapon, then that warrants like 1.5 to 2 seconds. But this is a revolver. A revolver shouldn't take that long to pull out. So therefore I'm just making it 0.8 seconds long. Another thing I do with animations is that I always put the length 1 frame extra ahead of the actual end of the animation. You'll see why when we finally get to implement the gun into the game. So now that we have our firing animation, our draw animation, we can do our reload empty. If you're going to do both reload and reload empty, I highly recommend doing reload empty first. That way when you go to do the reload, or the regular reload, you can take out nearly everything from the reload empty section and just leave the parts where your hands take out the old magazine and put in the new one. But in this case, I'm going to have to animate a whole lot more than a magazine. I'm gonna have to animate the chamber. I'm gonna have to animate the speed loader. All that fun jazz. Alright, I'll be back when I finally get the rough pass done. Oh yeah, there's a thing that I forgot to do, and that was rig the arms and the speed loader and the gun. So usually with a regular gun with a magazine, it would be preferable that you group the hands with the items that they hold. So for example, the right arm and the gun. I'm going to group the gun, and I'm going to call this arm R underscore gun. And I'm going to put the right arm underneath. So that way it's one group. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group the speed loader. I'm going to group the speed loader. Call it arml underscore mag, for example. And I'm going to put the left arm with that. That way, when you go to animate one hand going in to replace something, I don't know, like a magazine or something, you don't have to manually animate the magazine and the arm separately. You could just animate the one bone and everything will work just like that. Oh yeah, during the animations, this is where you'd want to add your sounds that you've exported earlier in the series. So in order to do that, you want to click on this magic wand called Animate Effects. And from here, you'll be allowed to add keyframes that allows you to add sounds. So when I add a keyframe here for sounds, I can click here to upload a file, and from here, I'll be able to click on, I don't know, Overture, let's see, Overture Eject. This is where the bullets, or this is when the bullets will be coming out. And there we go. That's how you add sounds to your animation. I'm gonna do it again because I forgot to add a sound here. So around this frame, open, and I'm gonna add Overture open. There we go. Now for this section, where the speed loader is being dropped so that the hand can reach for the barrel and spin it, or the chamber, whatever. There's a little curve that happens here that I really don't like. So this is where another plugin comes in, called Bakery. Bakery allows you to bake a bunch of keyframes into a bunch of other keyframes. I don't know how else to explain it, because I'm not good at explaining things. But anywho, what I do is I highlight the keyframes that I want to bake, and I want to go to Animation, and Bake Animations, and then click Confirm. And that will generate keyframes for every frame that this speed loader has interpolated. So from here, I just remove the easings from this animation, and from this point, I just have to manually tweak each and every keyframe that I do not like. Alright, I'm quite satisfied with this. This is almost done for an animation. I still have to add the small movements, or when doing certain motions, and I gotta add some extra flavor to the dead space, or the dead frames, where there's nothing happening. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'll see you all when I'm done.
One eternity later.
I think this animation is pretty good, as it is. I have all the motions that I want in it, and if I wanted to, I could always work on it later. So now that I have this animation done to my liking, I have all the little movements that I want to have in the animation, all the weighty bits and all that. I just have to repeat this process for every other animation that I have not done yet. So for this gun, I've yet to do the regular reload and inspect. For the reload is very simple. I'm pretty much just going to do majority of this, but I'm going to remove the spinning bit and shorten the animation by some time. So I'm gonna just quickly do that. Gonna get rid of the regular reload animation. Duplicate the reload empty. and I'm just going to rename it Reload. That's a lot of re's.
6.5 hours later.
I have my regular reload, where it does nothing stylish, it just does a typical reload. Now, the inspect animation, really it's just going to be the matter of imagining where you want to look at the gun, at what angle, and anything you might want to do with the gun. So for me, I'm planning on doing a couple of flips and, just general stylish things. Not too stylish as my other Malorian Arms gun, but stylish enough. Oh yeah, make sure to save your project often, because animating takes a long time, and the second that Blockbench might crash, you're probably going to lose a lot of progress. I mean, Blockbench has never crashed on me before, but it can always happen. Chances are low, but never zero.
The next day.
Alright, had my morning coffee, and finished off the inspect animation. I'm quite satisfied with how it looks. Oh, wait. I completely forgot about a whole nother aspect of animation. The cameras. So, we're gonna go back into Edit, and if you remember, we recently got the camera plugin. Recently? No. I just mentioned that if you wanted to work with cameras, you're gonna need the camera plugin. Anywho, for this, what you want to do is you want to right click and you want to click Add Camera. This will add, well, a camera to the scene. You want to just drag it up, bring it back, and a little bit to the left, roughly to where you want it. If you want to get a preview of what it may look like, you want to right click the camera and click Link Camera to Preview. This looks good. We go to Animate. I feel like it's a little too close, so I'm gonna move it back. Yeah, that looks good. We get a reload empty, reload. Yeah, it looks good. Now, the next thing you want to do with the camera is you want to right click it and you want to click Group Elements. The reason we're doing this is because VIX Point Blank doesn't use the camera itself for the animations. It uses the group that it's in. And you want to specifically name this underscore camera underscore, like so. That way VIX Point Blank knows where to look. That way Point Blank knows where to look for the camera animations. And now we can start animating the camera. Click Save, and we go to Animate. So, what I do for camera animations is I create a keyframe at the very start, and then I just drag along the timeline until I get to a point that I want to move the camera to. So let's just say 0.3 seconds in, add another camera. Oh, another really useful thing to get an idea of how the camera animations will look. If you go to Preview, Preview Scene, and use any of the Minecraft ones, I'll just use planes for example. This will greatly help with getting an idea of how your camera animations are going to look roughly in-game. For the camera rotations, I tend to have a delay between the motion of the model and the camera. So, you see the arm coming down here for the inspect. I tend to have an extra 2 or 3 frames before the camera finishes moving, so let's just do that. And for the most part, I end up using this whole section over here rather than using the widgets in 3D space. So at first, the rotation axes are a little confusing. X controls up and down, so positive digits go down and negative digits go up. Y controls left and right, so positive goes right and negative goes left. And then Z controls the, actually, I don't know what to call it. I think it's roll? No, pitch. I don't know, but here. Positive and negative. You can see what that does. So, once you understand that, it's time to move the camera to focus on different parts of the animation. So, I'm gonna, for this keyframe, I'm gonna pitch the camera down and to the right a bit. Nope. 2. And I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of angle. And what I do with all of my camera keyframes is that I always add an easing, regardless of what the camera's doing. This helps greatly with smoothing out the transitions between each keyframe of the camera. So for this, I'm just going to use the very slight one, and I'm going to do the in-out easing, or the S-curve. So there we go. We successfully moved the camera, well, rotated it. We're only going to do rotations. Can't really translate the camera because, you can't really translate your head left and right unless you're a Roblox character or something. But anywho, I'm just going to continue working on the camera animation, and I'll be back when the camera animation is done. Alright, I think the camera animations for this gun is done. Focuses on the different movements that are shown during the animation. So yeah, I'm quite satisfied with it. Now I just gotta repeat the process again for every other animation, and this gun should be good to go. I'm gonna follow the same steps that I took to animate the reload empty and reload animations with the camera. So I'm going to animate the camera for the reload empty first, and then I'm going to port it over to the regular reload and go from there. And it's always good to have a final keyframe at the end that sets everything back to 0. That way, transitions from animation to idle is seamless. And there we go. That didn't take too long. Now, one thing that is slightly bothering me is how this shoulder is getting into the frame. It kind of wrecks the illusion of having only your arms in frame and not everything else. I don't know how else to explain it, it just looks bad. So I'm already using this trick, but if we unlink our camera, you'll notice that this arm is already longer than the other arm. You are able to individually scale each, each axis of a different bone. So, for example, if I just get rid of the preview, if I click on scale, you'll notice that I can scale everything. So yeah, I'm just going to scale this up by an extra 3 blocks. Then move it down, set the preview, the planes again, and link my camera. There we go. And once again, I gotta repeat this process for the remaining animations, so just fire and draw.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting, and they had to hire a new one.
Now, the very, very last thing we need to do with our model is set up the display data. So for this, we need to go into the Display tab. Here we can configure how the gun is displayed on every section of our character. So I'm gonna disable the preview scene so it doesn't meddle with everything I'm doing here. So we can see the gun is roughly in the position of the hands already. I'd like to position it in a way where the hand is just behind the trigger, which is very similar to what the base mod does. I'm gonna put that up by half and put that up by half. There we go, very simple. Put that up by half, put that up by half, even though right hand never get used, or the left hand never gets used. Right hand, everything looks like a mess because this is supposed to be for an assault rifle, but we're gonna change that to fit our gun. Gonna set that to 20, and this really comes down to personal preference. Alright, so we have that. Gonna do the same for the offhand, out of the sake of consistency. The head, usually I just set the scale to 0. On the ground, I'm just gonna center it. And just for comparison, I'm going to preview it with the Minecraft player. That seems about right. Not just to help with everything, I'm going to hide the camera and the 2 arms. Frame, you don't really need to do this, but I'm doing it anyways. There we go. That looks good. And now for the GUI. Usually you could just leave it as is, but with how I'm styling my pack, I reset the rotation, and I'm going to set this to -90. Also going to move it up, and I'm going to scale it a bit. There we go. I believe that covers everything for animation and display data. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time where we finally get to exporting the gun into Minecraft. See you around. So, I hope that vehicle was not picked up by my mic. If so, I'm gonna have to cut that out in post. I swear to frickin' gosh.